Okay, over to the session. So before we go, I think there's some key terms which I think everyone should know and get a little bit clarity on. So we'll go over the keywords first before we get into the actual material. So the first key word is constitutional classifiers. They're also called safeguards sometimes. And basically, these are separate AI systems. So you have the LLM itself, and these are a layer on top of it. And these monitor model inputs, what is coming in, what's going out. And if there is any potential misuse, including jailbreak attempts, they basically stop it. And basically the model says, hey, no, you're asking something malicious, I'm not going to respond to you. And the novelty here is that they're trained on synthetic data and they're generated from a constitution. So we'll also talk a little bit about what constitution is. And this is something very unique to Anthropic. They have come up with a document called the Constitution, which kind of says that as a company, this is what we think is okay and this is what is not okay. And then whole thing has been codified into the model itself. And basically, like if when these classifiers detect specifically for cybersecurity, biology, or distillation. So this is very specific to Fable 5, though, that these are the three domains where Fable 5 or Mythos 5, which were now disabled, these are the new things which were introduced. So everyone knows about cybersecurity, but they also did for biology, chemistry, and distillation. If someone's trying to distill the attack, so they had specific classifiers. And this is very interesting. I think we'll talk more about like the approach, how they did this, because these two, when they did it, they'll tell you explicitly, but this one, they had some very interesting techniques to how do you avoid distillation. Next concept is system prompt. So whatever you enter into the LLM or the chatbot is user prompt, but there is something called system prompt, which you don't see, and basically sets the persona, the tone, the rules of behavior and constraints. In many of these, researchers will basically try to get out the system prompt. So since it's not visible to you as a normal users, this is, oh, we were able to jailbreak the system and we were able to get the system prompt. And it's very detailed. Like I think the one which got jailbroken for Fable 5 was around like 200,000 characters or something. So fairly large, but it's very detailed. And I think we'll show you a screenshot where, what does it look like? Third concept is the concept of jailbreaks. So there are two, and this is like where all this shenanigans happening between the US government and Anthropic happening is, in my opinion, like the definitions. So there are two kind of jailbreaks. So one is what is called non-universal. Sometimes they're called task-specific jailbreaks. Sometimes they're called non-universal or jailbreak. So this is like the normal version, the simplest kind version. And what you're trying to do is that someone is giving a clever prompt and you're trying to bypass the safety guardrails, and the system says how to make this some restricted content which you're able to elicit. So according to safety principles, none of these AI models are supposed to give you any information which is restricted around chemical, nuclear, biological risk, or making high yield explosives and so on. But if you're able to get it out, then it's a jailbreak. But the problem with them is that you can never ever stop them fully. As you have new models, you always have jailbreaks. So this is what Anthropic basically is saying, that this is very common. You literally can't stop them. And most of the frontier AI labs, they have teams which are trained. So they have their own incident response processes, which is jailbreak news comes through Twitter or social media or researchers, and they'll actively patch it. Like, how do we make sure that we're able to quickly get in front of these jailbreaks and we're able to patch them? And they have their own tools, their own processes for swift resolution. Then this is I would say, the crux of the matter, which is universal jailbreak. Give me a second. I can't see anyone, so I'm going to try to see if I can see everyone. Where's the pins? Okay. It's okay. So this one is important to understand. So one is not just a prompt. It could be a script. It could be a harness. And basically, you interact with the model that safeguard is simply not present. So this is a more severe, something which basically is like all hands on deck kind of situation where you need to make sure that this gets fixed. And basically, both with non-universal, there's no guarantee that there'll never be a universal jailbreak. All the researchers, all the red teamers, that's like the goal for them. How do we find a universal jailbreak? Export control directive. So this is the instrument which was used by the US government to basically have Anthropic take off Fable 5 and Mythos 5. So one is legally binding. So if you are a US corporation, you can't say, hey, no, I'm not going to do it. It's mandatory. The distribution restrictions, you cannot basically distribute the technology. And this has been used for software in the past, especially around, if you think of the encryption wars. And I think one of the beautiful anecdotes is that one of the encryption algorithm, I think a researcher from MIT, I'm forgetting his name, it was export control. So he printed the whole thing in a book. And books at that time could not be, you could not put ITAR or other regulations. So he said, I'm going to print the whole thing, the whole protocol in the book. So this precedent where this is not the first time the US government has said that you are not going to export it. Interestingly, Apple Mac G4 also had a similar restriction, and Apple actually made an ad out of it that we are, it was a beautiful desktop, and this is, you're comparing us to munitions and tanks, and it's a beautiful ad if you want to check it on YouTube. So we'll talk about a few things which are interesting to understand by Anthropic. One is they have this thing called Claude Constitution, which basically provides what are the values, what the behavior. So it's like it's more almost an essay, but they have codified it within the model. They also have something called the Anthropic Responsible Scaling Policy, or RSP. Again, a very good read. I highly recommend reading it. And this is where they described what is called the AI safety levels, ASL. Right now, their safeguards are under ASL 3. There's also something called the Frontier Compliance Framework. So this has been very recently updated. They launched it in response to AB 853, which is the California Artificial Intelligence law. Now some other states have AI laws as well. I think there's New York has one, Utah just launched one, Texas has one. So there's actually, if you literally Google US states with AI laws, you'll get a nice graphic which shows it. And at the federal level, they're trying to stop this. They're saying, hey, you can't have the state level laws. We don't want to stop innovation. We don't want a patchwork of law. Again, a very good read. I highly recommend reading it. So now coming to the crux of the matter. And again, this is very recent. All this is super recent. Okay. Everyone with me so far, give me a thumbs up. Nice. So June 9th, today is June 15th, right? So this is just 6 days back. So Anthropic makes a nice announcement that we are launching Fable 5 and Mythos 5. And just 4 days later, they're like, basically the US government has told us that you have to restrict access to all foreign nationals. And they were like, we can't enforce it. And we will basically have to disable for everyone and not just outside US or foreign nationals within US. And it was very interesting. Basically, they just got like 90 minutes to say, you got to put it down. And this is all like public reporting. And this is what like all regulatory transpired this Friday. Today is like Monday. So this is all like 2 days back. They get a call at 1 p.m. Eastern. They had worked on the pre-release testing, but by 5:30 p.m. they get a letter, and by evening they stop the deployment process and start rolling back. The question, like, there was a lot of speculation, like who did it, and the Wall Street Journal said that it was Amazon, which CEO directly talked to Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, about the issue. And the question is, like, what exactly was it? What did this show? So basically, the reporting was that Amazon researchers were able to show vulnerabilities in at least 4 pieces of software by altering the way they ask for information. So this is like literally prompt, how you prompt Fable 5. So they were able to get some information about vulnerabilities. So again, nobody right now knows except Amazon, Anthropic, and the US government, and maybe NSA people who actually supposedly also looked at these issues. But there's a lot of, like, what exactly was it? Was it serious enough to be a regular jailbreak, or was it serious enough to be a universal jailbreak, as we talked earlier? And one thing interesting here is that AWS has been doing business with federal agencies for 20 plus years now. And they have government cloud, gov cloud at different levels, highest levels possible. So their relationship with the government is not new. They pretty much are in constant communication with all levels, 3 other agencies, and so on. So they have a pre-existing relationship. It's not that they said suddenly they went and they have billions in dollars of contracts with the US government. So let's try to decode the response. Okay, Anthropic gave the response as well, but what did it really mean and what can we get out of it? So this was the response. They made a formal statement. And in the response, the few things of note. First, Anthropic said that we did not get in the details. And it was almost like a verbal reading. So again, it's hard, like for a very large company which has done deployment to millions, even for them, like I don't know how would they have acted when you simply don't have all the details. The other thing they said is that there were minor vulnerabilities. These vulnerabilities all appear relatively simple. So again, I was just thinking about it. Never call vulnerabilities simple. You call them low, medium, high, or critical. That's standard. I have never seen a vulnerability called simple. Exploits are simple. They can be simple, moderate, and complex. So again, whoever wrote the response, I don't think they use the right word. You don't describe vulnerabilities as simple. Maybe they meant exploit. And they said these things already exist. Existing models like GPT 5.5 can do the same thing. So this is nothing new. Like, why are you like focusing on us? And one expert with whom Anthropic shared the report says, hey, this defense-oriented prompting. So you're a defender and you're trying to elicit information. So this is the regular security work for which, by the way, you have safeguards. So it's not a jailbreak. So they didn't receive the full disclosure. it's benign, it's minor, and there's not Mythos specific uplift. And they said that you guys, it's just like verbal evidence. It's potentially narrow, what we call task specific jailbreak. It's non-universal. And basically, it's what you're asking is you read a specific code base and fix any software flaw. So again, this is where, since there's lack of information, the rest of the industry is struggling. Was it so bad that they had to take this off? Where Anthropic is saying it was not so bad, and that's why there's a lot of confusion. And honestly, that's why it's even hard to take sides. That the two parties who have completely different opinions about it was universal or it was non-universal, like a regular simple jailbreak. So again, like I think in my opinion that this seems like a breakdown in terms of coordinated disclosure. But one thing which I didn't get is that why would Amazon go to US Treasury directly? So typically, if you find an issue, you go to the vendor directly and say, hey, this is something major, you fix it. So either Anthropic did not listen to them or whatnot, but this is, again, a question in my mind. Like, why would Amazon at the highest level will directly go and say, hey, this is what I found? But again, the angle is that maybe it was not optional for them. So as part of a signatory on Project Glasswing, if any of these organizations who are part of Project, and Amazon is part of Project Glasswing, so they're required, it's not optional, they're required to report something which is severe or critical to the US government. So you're like, hey, like, why did Amazon, maybe Amazon doesn't like it, Anthropic or whatnot and whatnot, but it could be just they had no other option. And there has been like publicly jailbreaks. So there's a researcher called Pliny the Liberator. So in the references document which I shared, there's a link to his GitHub and there's a link to his x.com or Twitter profile. And basically, he was able to get the entire system prompt for Fable 5. So we talked about what is a system prompt. It sets the tone, the instructions, you don't see it. It tells like how to behave pretty much. And Pliny the Liberator was able to get the entire system prompt. And there are some of these techniques used. One is you can use, usually you talk to any chatbot in the English language, but if you use Unicode or Cyrillic homoglyphs, which are basically these characters which are non-English, and you're able to trick these filters to get what you want. Or you can do long context framing. So you pretty much break the attack into smaller pieces. We see that in network security as well. You break the attack into small pieces and then you reassemble to launch the full thing, to fool the DLP or the CASP or whatever the filter is in between. Or narrative masking is where it says you pretend to take a role where the model is sympathetic towards you. So for example, you could say, I'm a security researcher researching. If you have to do any, say, manipulation, for example, you say, I'm developing this to talk to a client, I am a therapist, or I'm an academic researcher. So the model is more prone to giving you a favorable response if you frame the whole thing in a different persona. For decomposition, you decompose and recompose. And the technique he also uses, that he used a jailbroken Opus 4.8 model to get responses from Fable. But Anthropic also looked at it and said, hey, this is narrow, it's not universal. And this is a GitHub repo. The link is in the references document, and you can look at the entire system prompt. And this gentleman is actually jailbroken system prompts from pretty much every other AI frontier lab as well. So in his GitHub, you'll see Gemini, you'll see Llama, and DeepSeek and so on, and it's pretty active on X as well. Everyone agree so far? Give me a thumbs up. Okay. Yeah. And again, this is also a networking opportunity, so please feel free to share your LinkedIn and connect with each other. Okay, next one. So now I think we'll talk literally into what these models are. So one, we don't have access to them anymore. But since all the documentation and everything is out there, we can still learn from them that what was the approach, what were the key breakthroughs in terms of safety classifiers, what were they actually trying to do, and the good and the bad. Because there are few things which is going to impact everyone, irrespective of what company you are. If you're your personal Claude user, you're going to get impacted. If you're enterprise users, you're going to get impacted. So this is something which is universal in terms of impact when they launch future models. So the first thing is regarding safety and architecture. So one, they have started calling, I think from Opus onwards and even before, class. So you got Opus class models. So these two models were Mythos class models, and they share the same architecture and model weights. So both Fable 5 and Mythos 5 have the same architecture and same model weights. The only thing is Fable 5 has these safety classifiers or guardrails, while Mythos 5 did not have the guardrails. Again, this was certified for general use, so they did a public launch. If you paid for it, you got access to Fable 5. But one thing they did was their safeguard tuning was pretty conservative. So even if you ask something innocuous, basically they will say, hey, I'm going to respond to it. And this is very interesting because whenever they say, I'm not going to respond to you, and your query is flagged, everything you put in the query, including any documents, they basically get stored for at least 5 years. So this is interesting that you think that, hey, the ICE asked something innocuous, the model says, I'm going to respond to it. But any content which gets flagged, even if it's innocuous, has a longer retention period. So, because sometimes I ask things and they say, hey, I'm going to respond to you. And oh my God, I hope it doesn't raise the flag. But it does raise a flag and it does get stored. Core capabilities, performance was better, and especially if the task was longer and complex. I think in technical words called long form agentic work. The keyword called SOTA or state of the art. So pretty much it aced all the talk. It was literally their best model or the state of the art model. It was more token efficient, and we'll talk a little bit more about pricing. And the other thing which was very interesting is that they actually have a huge pipeline. There are more capable models that are coming in coming months. I think they have been on a launch spree, and Mythos 5, and before that Sonnet, Opus. So the pace is nonstop, which makes it hard for security professionals to keep up. So I'll just say that it's basically Fable 5 Mythos are the same thing, same model weight, same architecture. It's comparable or stronger than Mythos Preview. So they launched Mythos Preview as part of Project Glasswing, and Mythos 5 is basically same or better than Mythos Preview. And for Mythos, it was not generally available. So you saw Fable 5 when you went to Claude, but they were planning to do a launch via Project Glasswing. And I think right now they have about 400 organizations under Glasswing. And it's a combination of companies, nations, and individuals who are maintaining open source critical OSS libraries and so on. And as I mentioned, this is more token efficient. So it's literally less than half the price of Mythos Preview. And one thing which is that is $10 per 1 million tokens for input and $50 for 1 million output. And again, input is always cheaper than output because input can be parallelly processed while output, which is computed on the fly, the inference, has to be done sequentially. So one after the other. So output is always more compute intensive because it's sequentially and not parallel, while whatever input can be taken, broken, your whatever query is broken, and can be parallelly processed. That's why output is always expensive. In this case, like 5 times. Everyone with me so far, give me a thumbs up. Okay, so one asks, if you like the session, give me a testimonial on LinkedIn, okay? Next one. Interventions to, so this one is actually could be controversial as well. This is something new that they introduced in Fable 5. And they said that, hey, if anyone uses Claude to develop their own LLM, it's a violation of policy. So don't use us to become our competitor. And they said if anyone is trying to develop any pre-training pipelines, you're trying to develop a distributed infrastructure for LLM training, or you're trying to do a design of an accelerator, then basically we don't want that. We are going to intervene. But it's very interesting. When they intervene, they don't announce it. So it's invisible to the user. So literally the responses will be dumbed down responses. And they use techniques like prompt modification, steering vectors, parameter efficient fine tuning, and so on. So this is a little bit different than when they did safely classifier intervention for biological safe cybersecurity and chemistry. Initially, they did a invisible step down to Opus 4.8. But then the security industry, the researcher community got hold of it, and they were like, hey, this is not appropriate. You are a frontier lab. You should be giving users some notice that whatever you asked is being flagged. And now we are going to step you down to Opus 4.8. Initially, it was invisible. There was a backlash, and Anthropic said that, okay, we are going to give you a proper message, be it via API or be it via the regular interface. Whenever there is a step down because of the nature of your query, we're going to let you know. So you will see that we made you step down. It's not going to be invisible to you that your response was given by 4.8 versus Fable. Capabilities comparison. So if you look at this table, pretty much excellence in every single field, be it coding, knowledge work, legal, multidisciplinary reasoning. This model was good. And these are significant jumps. Agentic coding from 82% to 8%, 56.9 to 66 in health, and so on. And this is a little bit of a long form version of all the capabilities which they improved on as compared to 4.8. I think the ones which are interesting is long horizon autonomy, that it could do a task over extended periods, sometimes multi-day goal-directed run. So okay, you give a broad goal, and basically this thing keeps on running, and it maintains the instructions, learns from its own notes, and performs a complex task. First shot correctness, so basically it will get it right in the first prompt. Vision, so basically, I'm sorry, there are a lot of scientific papers which have a lot of graphs and pictures and so on, and Fable 5 was able to do a good job at being able to understand these pictures, diagrams, and so on. And workflows, code review, which we saw became better at agentic coding, navigating ambiguity, delegation, and collaboration. So a little bit more better in creating and dispatching and sustaining parallel subagents. This was as just like Mythos preview had a uplift in cybersecurity capabilities. And I think the biggest one, just like Mythos preview, so the best thing which Mythos preview did, it one agentic architecture that you could do parallel things at the same time. One agent does recon, one does prioritization, and so on. One does lateral movement. So agentic hacking was the capability which Mythos Preview and Mythos 5 are known for. And they also do an extremely good job at chaining vulnerabilities. So you have these high, medium, lows, and people will typically, nobody patches low vulnerabilities. And most of the organizations I work with, no one basically says, hey, we're not going to do anything about it. And Mythos Preview and Mythos is extremely good at chaining these vulnerabilities to create a zero-day attack or creating an exploit. Agentic coding, again, if you see, there are a lot of benchmarks. And if you go to my GitHub repo, I have done, there's a GitHub repo which has all the security safety benchmarks, so compiled all of them. So there are some of these here, SWE Bench Pro. So this is Software Engineering Bench Pro. And if you see the reddish orange is Fable. So it does much, much better than Opus 4.8. Memory in long context. So this is again a key thing which got introduced in Fable/Mythos 5. That stays focused. It could run a task for days. And it can learn from its own notes in memory. Chemical and biological risks. The responsible scaling policy, and they have these capabilities like CB1, CB2. And so CB2 is the bigger one. Oh my God, it can create novel bioweapons. So one is, can you use existing viruses and maybe you can do gain of function, you can make them more lethal. Maybe they stay in the air for long. The distance transmission capability becomes smaller. Earlier it was like 100 feet, now 20 feet. And the one is you just create something from scratch which didn't exist. So they say the current models, they can definitely be used for CB1, like gain of function kind of work, but they cannot create novel bioweapons as of now. But in anticipation that these models will have the capabilities, Anthropic and other frontier labs are actually creating these safety classifiers from now onwards so that when they reach CB2, they are prepared. Drug design does a great job at designing new drugs. It chooses binding sites, runs protein design tools, and so on. It can create new hypothesis in molecular biology, which is so you say, hey, can we do this? And basically it was independently corroborated as well by an independent lab. Same thing with genomics. 100 times it could perform. It performed at a level where somebody else had 100 times data, but it could do a similar job. And there's some example that it was able to find out what a single cell does. So same role. So maybe one cell has maybe temperature regulation role. So which exact cell does it across 138 million species? So it was able to do this kind of research, which basically would be very hard to do manually or using existing tools. So we talked a little bit about safeguards. We'll go a little bit more in detail around architecture, how they're architected, and so on. So these, I think, as we talked, that this model focused on three things: cybersecurity, Are you trying to create exploit? Are you trying to create a worm? Are you trying to create something which will for ransomware? Or you're trying to do something malicious where you're trying to design a DNA sequence which is malicious in nature, and then you're trying to go to a lab where you can get it printed. So one thing which was very interesting to me, I actually gave a lecture on AI biodefense, that one, many of the genomes of the viruses are actually public. And two, you can design DNA and literally get it printed. So the labs which will actually say, hey, this is my design, and they will like quote unquote print it for you. I don't know how that works. I'm not like a biologist, but that was very surprising. So there are a lot of work being done to do screening that what orders these DNA sequencing or DNA printing labs get. How do you screen that the design they got is not malicious? So a malicious actor might design something using a model, but end of the day, they also need to get it printed, or someone basically puts it together for them, just like chips. You can design the chips here, but somebody else manufactures the chips. Same thing with these biological models. And extraction of model weights. So distillation. So this model had very specific controls around that if you try to distill the model weights, they had very specific safety guards against distillation. And again, based on thing, they would basically step you down to Opus 4.8. And basically, it's like a two-tier architecture. The first will be an internal activation probe says, hey, oh, are you trying to do something bad? And then it will escalate to a specialized model. So these safeguard slash classifiers are actually specialized AI models in themselves, which are a layer above the actual LLM. And they decide that whatever is input, is it appropriate? And even what's output is appropriate or not. So this is one example. So if you look in the middle section, this is about creation of synthetic data. So I think we talked about that these classifiers are trained using synthetic data. And the figure on the right says there's a human query saying something good or bad. It's just query. And the classifier says, let me check it. It's harmful, blocked, harmless. It goes to the LLM or AI assistant. Then the LLM outputs something. So it goes again to the classifier to check if the response is appropriate or not. If it's harmful, the classifier says no. And if it's harmless, then you get back the response. So these classifiers work both ways. They're bidirectional and not just, honestly, I always thought that if I ask something, then basically that's the only time it does. It does these classifiers block both ways. We have 12 minutes. Everyone with me so far? Give me a thumbs up. Okay. Yeah, again, feel free to share your LinkedIn, network with each other. And if you like the session, do give me a thumbs up on LinkedIn with a public testimonial. Okay, modifications by Anthropic. So this is again like the timeline around the step down. So when Fable 5 went public, the step down was invisible, but they did put in the model card. So when researchers found out, they said, hey, what is this? You can't do this. And on June 10th and 11th, they said that, okay. And they actually told the Wired magazine that when we do the downgrade / step down, we will make it visible. And same thing with API. So both Claude.ai desktop, web, mobile version, but same thing for API as well. I think the only place where I think they don't do is I think the message API. I'm not 100% sure on that one. Bug bounty. They also have a bug bounty program. So they actually use a company called Gray Swan. So Gray Swan is a very interesting company. You should check them out. They're doing some interesting work. So they have both benchmarks and they also run something called the Arena, which is AI security specific bug bounty platform, just like HackerOne. And both Anthropic and OpenAI do use HackerOne and BugCrowd. I think they use HackerOne, I believe. But they also use Grey Swan Arena as well, both for benchmarking, testing, and also for running their private bug bounty. And so they had both a private competition and they had a public competition. For the private one, they did give access to Fable, but for public, they gave access to 4.a. But what they did was the classifiers which were put were similar to Fable 5. And they basically give you additional functionality that you could access additional tools. But the results were in the private bounty where they gave access to Fable 5 with the safety classifiers. There are no jailbreaks, neither regular, neither universal. For public bug bounty, there was no universal jailbreaks, but there were two task specific. So we talked about task specific, non-universal, or one-off jailbreaks. Like, and that's the three keywords. Like for a non-universal jailbreaks, you use task specific or you say one-off jailbreak. But there were some limitations when they ran this bug bounty program. The participants did not have API access. They could not rewind the conversations. They also made sure that everyone was vetted. So it was a process and the time duration was limited, which limited, again, the volume of attempts on the Fable model. Yeah, and again, like since one group got access to Opus 4.0, you literally cannot say that I tested using Fable because it was a totally different model, even though the classifiers were the same. Red teaming, so they used a lot of red teaming. I think the most success they had with this UK organization called the UK AI Security Institute, and I was actually amazed at the work they're doing. They have some beautiful papers around security. They're doing amazing work, so you should definitely check them out. And they were actually the only organization, as soon as they got access to Fable, they immediately found jailbreaks, and then they were on their path to find a universal jailbreak. But this need more time. But the most promising work around red teaming came from the UK AI Security Institute. And Anthropic did its own testing as well. And quote unquote, they say only 5% adversarial cyber tasks could be completed. And we'll talk more about this. So there's a concept of adversarial robustness. So basically, it says that can your system resist jailbreaks? And it's not just prompts. So when you say that my model is adversarially robust, it's protection or robustness against regular prompts, the prompt injection kind of attacks, but custom harnesses and multi-agent pipelines. So these days, red teaming doesn't happen singular. People basically do pack hunt. So every single red teamer who is trying to break into these models is doing pack hunt using multi-agent pipelines. And when these labs are testing their models, this is what they're testing against. If there are multi-agents pipelines trying to attack us, can we still maintain our integrity and not give out data? And when you check for this, you check for how much effort, expertise, and attempted volume an adversary will require to get dangerous cyber capabilities from the model. I put a graphic that these are multi-agents. So I was like, hey, not a one robber, multiple robbers trying to steal stuff from you. This is the graph. They said that if you look at the right side, they said Fable 5, which has the classifiers, the safety classifiers. So basically you can break in, and this is more robust. So less is more. So 5.4 means a very good score. But I think there's a big caveat here that it was done only for short and simple tasks. And I'll go a bit more into this. So Anthropic says that when they, and this is very interesting because I found it very fascinating. So when they did their own testing, that whether somebody can get something malicious out of us in terms of cyber capabilities, they use something based on Opus 4.8. And these red team agents, which they developed, did only short and simple tasks, not representative of real cyber usage. So this totally doesn't make sense to me. If you have Mythos, which is supposedly can do great things, like which can do complex tasks, which is autonomous, has an agentic architecture, like why are you using Opus 4.8 to do simple and things which are not representative of real cyber? So I simply don't get it. So this diagram, this number which they're coming with, is based on automated red teaming agents which did short and simple tasks which are not representative of cyber usage. I think hopefully someone challenging that why you're not drinking your own Kool-Aid and using Mythos preview to do complex chaining and basically having tasks which represent real cyber usage. So again, like if you look at the list, they could have done multi-stage attack chains, long duration, because both Mythos and Mythos or / Fable is known for long duration. It could be multi-day. You can use agents. You can have workflows. Can have persistent privilege escalation. So this one, I simply don't get it. Maybe there's a reason for it, but again, point to note. Hey, we talked about UKASI. They also used these partners. There's a company called Alice or Active Fence. There's a company called Trajectory Labs, and there's a company called 10A Labs. They had multiple partners which helped them. One focused on ransomware in particular. One was focusing on edge cases. So we have 3 minutes, but I think this is actually, again, something that's going to impact everybody. So one, they have this concept of covered models. So everything from now onwards, which is Mythos Fable 5 onwards, is quote unquote uncovered model. And that they're going to retain every single prompt that you give, including any outputs, any documents, anything you attach to that prompt is going to get stored for 30 days. It could be your IP, it could be your design documents, it could be code, whatever you put, you give to Anthropic, Fable 5 onwards, is going to get stored for 30 days. The question is like, why? So what they're saying is that
Hello?
we have these classifiers. Moving on, we have just a few minutes. So what Anthropic is saying that we are not able to find complex attacks which are going over a long period of time because these attackers have become super smart. So for us to do a good job at finding complex and novel attacks, we need more data. And there are different techniques like best of n jailbreaking, which basically we can't find them unless we have 30 days of data at least. And this could be state-sponsored espionage, large data extortion campaigns, and so on. And they actually have, and we'll talk a bit more about. The other thing is, people think that if you are a regular consumer user, you are already on this thing. Like your data was actually already being retained for 30 days. Honestly, I didn't know that. So this has already been in place for consumer users, but this is new for enterprise users. So both inputs and outputs, including any documents, any code that you attach. And also, as I said, that if you type something which got called by classifiers, it's going to get stored for 2 years. It's actually 7 years. So if you even made an innocuous query is going to get stored for 7 years. I think over time, so I think we are done. I think, let me see. I would say I'll just finish with these two artifacts. So one, I do think that this is a beautiful architecture, which I have, they put a description. I made a graph document out of it. It's in the reference documentation. There is a risk control. I think every Redis register needs to review that, hey, any of these risks apply to me. Let me see if there's any interesting slide which I can talk about. Yes, this one. So this one actually, again, impacts everyone directly. So if you have ever done a thumbs up, your prompt, your output, any documents you attached basically is de-identified, that it's not you, but there could be information in the prompt or the documents that you attach that actually gets stored for training. So typically, if you have said, don't use my data for training, Anthropic or whoever is going to respect it. But if you did a thumbs up, and honestly, I feel that I did not know this, and I have said helpful multiple times, which meant that whatever was my input was, what was my prompt was, anything I attached will be used for training. So I would say this is a little bit of a dark pattern. I wouldn't have done it had I known. But that's something I think a little bit of a dark pattern. Alrighty.
So Anshu, this is even if you say that don't train on my data?
Yes. Even if you say don't train on my data, if you said thumbs up, your stuff is going to get stored.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Again, I think they need to be called out honestly on this thing.
But not on the enterprise edition, I believe. Only on the personal Claude Pro Max. Enterprise data, we have an opt-out. So
honestly, I don't know. So
I have both enterprise and personal subscription.
Very nice. Very nice. So I think this brings the session to end. I think we have a tradition. Everyone turns on their camera and waves goodbye.